Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins in 1965. A guy by the name of Bernard Garrett is seen in Washington, D.C., and he is ready to give testimony before a committee, but the scene shifts back to Bernard's upbringing in Willis, Texas, in 1939. He hears his customers discussing finances and real estate investing, while he is working as a shoe shiner outside a bank, and records what he hears. One day, when he was listening to a bank meeting, a policeman saw him and began following him, saying that his father would find out he was spying on white people. The next evening, Bernard's father speaks to his son, telling him tales of how, when he was a young man, young black men could be hanged for less. He comments Bernard is a talented youngster, but no white guy will let him get wealthy. Bernard, though, is adamant, one day he will make a fortune. We are transported to Los Angeles. In 1954, Bernard is traveling to see his wife's uncle in a car, with his wife Eunice, and son Bernard Jr. The uncle suggests Bernard apply for a job at Northrop, a manufacturer of airplanes, but he respectfully declines, saying he will instead try his hand at real estate. His plan is to purchase real estate, and rent it. The uncle begins to chuckle, and declares that he won't make it. Tony apologizes for his father's rudeness to him the previous evening, when giving his cousin a ride to work in the morning. When Bernard leaves, Matt, a white boy and friends with Tony, thinks Bernard must be wealthy, because he owns a car, and asks Tony what Bernard does. Tony responds that Bernard owns properties. A few days later, Bernard takes his wife to see a house in a white neighborhood, that they can afford, but they don't have the money to make any improvements. After getting an idea, his wife introduces him to Joe, a potential co-investor, with whom she had previously worked. Bernard tells his wife he's not teaming with Joe, because he acts far too casually, carelessly and like a playboy, and he leaves without presenting his business concept. His wife is not pleased, because she believes he had the wrong impression of Joe, and wants Bernard to have another conversation. The governor, Joe's friend, arrives, as they are settling into their car outside, but Bernard is still averse to working with him. Later, Bernard visits Patrick, the owner of the house he can afford, and asks him for a loan of $10,000 for remodeling, if he buys the building. Using some computations and numbers, Patrick replies he doesn't make agreements in that manner. Bernard promptly corrects him when Patrick's calculations are slightly off, which excites Patrick, because few people have such expertise, but he still won't provide him with a loan. Bernard notices Patrick's gift from his banker, Mr. Reed, who works at Mid-City Bank, which is on a shelf behind him. Later, to speak with the banker, he drives to Mid-City Bank. He waits outside, because Mr. Reed isn't available to meet him. He introduces himself, and says that he has a business concept that would be beneficial to both he and Patrick, as Mr. Reed exits the office. Bernard returns home, and tells his wife in the shed that he was unable to persuade Mr. Reed. He gets a call out of the blue from Patrick, who seems serious, and claims to have overheard Bernard talking to his banker. When he asks Bernard if what he did adheres to standard business practices, Bernard nervously replies that he doesn't believe it does. Patrick now sounds happier, and adds that he'll do the deal, saying that he appreciates people who don't follow conventional business practices, like himself. Next day, Bernard and his wife go out to a nightclub to celebrate. Joe walks up to him, and the two start talking. The following day, Bernard and Tony are seen beginning to renovate the house that he had purchased. They are told they can't be there, by a resident who sees them, but Bernard argues that he owns the building, and is permitted to carry out renovation work until 6 o'clock in the evening. He enters the apartment, and reacts angrily, calling him snarky, and pointing out that the building is white. Matt shows up to assist with the renovation. Bernard asks him if he's comfortable working for him, and Matt responds he has for his entire life. When Bernard asks him if he is comfortable working for a black man, he clarifies that his sole concern with respect to color is that his money is green. They begin remodeling, but shortly after, 2 police officers show up, and inform Bernard that a resident in the building contacted them, and claimed he was posing as the owner. When Matt tries to defend Bernard, the police intimidate him. The 2 cops tell Bernard he needs to treat his tenants with greater respect, as he picks up the paperwork, verifying his ownership. The elderly woman vacates the property, as soon as she discovers that Bernard and his family will be joining her as tenants, because she cannot abide the presence of black people. Other slightly wealthier black families move in over the next few days, and soon the property is completely leased. Patrick suggests a 50-50 collaboration to acquire additional rental properties, after observing Bernard's success and real estate talent, who gladly agrees, because he believes using Patrick to represent the business, he will be able to grow more quickly. The 2 renovate and acquire ever finer residences, with assistance from Matt, Tony and Bernard's wife for furniture and renovations. Bernard takes his wife to a large mansion one day, and inquires about the furniture the house requires. She is shocked when he abruptly informs her it is their new house, and is ecstatic. Patrick is discovered dead in his bed a few months later. Later, in a bargain, Patrick's wife offers Bernard 25% of all the properties Patrick and he had jointly acquired. Although Bernard finds it ludicrous, he has little choice except to accept the 25%, or receive nothing, because his name is not on any paperwork. Bernard approaches Mr. Reed, to see if there's any chance he can assist him, but he refuses to even meet. Bernard suddenly has an idea and approaches Joe, who he now recognizes as the owner of 18 rental homes, and suggests they create a cooperative business. If they work together, they might be able to purchase the banker's building. The 12 banks that lease space there will be forced to pause before denying them loans in the future. They will be able to expand more quickly once they are not denied loans, and can begin acquiring additional properties in white-only neighborhoods. Joe remarks that he is quite bold, but he queries why anyone would want to sell their houses to them, given that they are black. They invite Matt to serve as the public face of their firm, who is skeptical. In a cafe, a waitress named Susie approaches Matt, because she is interested in him. Despite being a few years younger than him, she claims that everyone knows him from Hollywood High. He responds that he is thinking about a new job. She is impressed when Matt explains that the position is really a partnership in real estate investing. His attitude immediately improves, and he returns to see Bernard and Joe, announcing he will gladly accept the position. Joe teaches Matt how to play golf, since Matt needs to impress the bank's property owner. Bernard meets Donald, a former client of Joe, who is willing to finance them up to $2 million to buy the bank property at the same time. Over the course of several weeks, Matt is seen struggling, from having no knowledge to having some, and gradually getting better at golf and arithmetic. He quickly masters the situation, picks up correct dining manners, and purchases a suit. As they discuss the banker's building deal, Bernard reveals that they have planned for Matt to run into Charles Renault, the building's owner, at a posh golf club. As anticipated, Matt sees Charles a few days later, and he is able to win Charles over, by demonstrating his golfing prowess, and ultimately finalize the purchase of the building for $1.56 million. Following their celebration of their purchase, they cultivate positive connections with the lenders. More and more upscale homes in white-only areas are purchased by them. Susie and Matt get married. Eventually, the trio are real estate moguls, ending up meeting the U.S. Vice President, who came by the banker's building. A few years later, when they pay Bernard's father a visit in Texas, the latter tells Bernard how proud of him he is. Bernard and his son go out for a stroll, when he notices the mainland bank, outside of which he once cleaned the shoes of wealthy men, many years prior. He tells Joe he wants to purchase the bank. In Texas, where people are even more hostile to black business owners, Joe claims running a bank is extremely complex, and outside of their area of competence. Bernard though is certain, using Matt as a front, similar to how they did with the banker's building. When Joe learns that there is a sizable untapped market, because black people are now not permitted to borrow money from banks, he reluctantly agrees to partner. Later, Matt is able to purchase it, leaving the former owner Florence with a 20% ownership stake. They quickly start subtly allowing creditworthy black folks to borrow, tripling the amount of loans they take. As a result, some black families are able to purchase nicer homes, and other black entrepreneurs are able to boost the profits of their companies. After 3 months, suddenly the bank executive and Florence learn that loans are being made to black people. He confronts them, warning that there would be a bank run if people realize this, and pulls out a paper. As a result of anonymous complaints of an excessive number of risky loans, the Treasury Department will conduct an inspection in 1 month. Matt pitches Joe and Bernard a plan to resolve the issue. In order to distribute the loans they have made between the two banks, he adds that they can purchase another tiny bank, which he can operate himself. By doing this, there is a far lower chance that the government will shut them down for making too many loans. Joe and Bernard believe it is a bad idea. Matt expresses his gratitude for everything they have taught him, but warns that if he is not given the chance to join them as a partner and an owner, he will cease helping them. Despite the challenging circumstance, Joe and Bernard concur. Marlin Bank, their recently acquired bank, is purchased by Matt. After a few days, they start making the financial adjustments they need to reduce their risk. A federal bank examiner visits Marlin Bank one morning, and informs Matt he will return in an hour to review the master records. Matt calls Bernard right away, who warns his wife Matt is in trouble, and in order to stop Matt from making a mistake, which is impossible, he will have to attend the meeting with the examiner personally. As Matt and the examiner meet, Bernard pretends to clean, and starts to assist Matt, but the examiner closes the door, because they are discussing secret material. Bernard turns away when he can no longer hear. As Matt begins to get into trouble, he excuses himself to check some files, and goes outside to ask the others for assistance. They offer him some guidance, but it is ineffective, because the examiner identifies other problematic loans on their books. The group decides that Joe and Bernard must contribute $300,000 of their own funds to pay off the bank's defaulted loans. A few days later, Donald, Joe's attorney, calls to inform him that Mainland Bank had acquired $300,000 in bad debt from Marlin Bank. After hearing the news, Joe and Bernard race to Mainland Bank, asking Matt angrily what he is doing, since purchasing bad loans constitutes fraud. Joe is astonished and Bernard begs Matt to immediately bring out the books to rectify. But just then, representatives from the federal government show up, and declare that the Treasury Department has suspended Mainland's banking license. They dismiss Matt, inform everyone that they must leave, and declare the bank closed till further notice. When they step outside, Joe and Bernard are taken into custody by the FBI. Later, in Washington, D.C., a lawyer informs them that although all of the state banking charges against them have been dismissed, there are still federal charges against them, concerning loose rules in banking, which have to do with Joe's and Bernard's allegations. If they focus on that, they might turn this political, forcing the federal charges to be dropped as well. Meanwhile, Matt is in trouble for handling the bank matter in a dishonest manner, and is given the choice of accepting 50 years prison time, or arguing in court that Joe and Bernard were solely to blame and be free. He gives it some thought and testifies in court, claiming Joe and Bernard had hired him, controlled him, and given him instructions on how to manage the loans and cash transfers. Following this, Bernard has two options. He would either walk away a free man if he accepted the immunity offer, and admitted what Matt had claimed, that he had benefited from lax rules to enrich himself. Or, he can reject, and say whatever he likes, the court will determine whether he is lying. Eunice and Bernard later wander outside. He asserts that it was definitely too soon for two black people to own a bank in Texas, but his wife argues that given the way it brings these concerns to light, it may have actually been the appropriate time. Bernard walks into the courtroom, and claims in the testimony that all men are created equal, a lofty ideal that hasn't yet been realized in the nation's foundational papers. He gets up and declares if a guy can't receive a loan, he can't establish a business, amass riches, or buy a home, and as a result, is excluded from the American ideal. He does this despite repeated warnings that he will lose his immunity. Joe and Bernard are sentenced to 3 years in prison, and the federal government takes all of their assets, including all of their 177 owned buildings and their personal fortunes, and poses the rhetorical question, how can so many black people just be excluded from the American dream? After prison time, Eunice protests that they don't have any home. Bernard shares a secret. The day before Matt gave his testimony, Matt called him and told about 50 years prison time threat if he didn't blame them for everything. Because the government hadn't yet confiscated their wealth, he told Matt to buy him and Joe 2 properties in the Bahamas. Eunice is ecstatic when she learns this. 3 years after they gave their testimony, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act of 1968, putting an end to the long-running racial problems with real estate purchases and rentals. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.